I want to tell you about a moment that still feels raw every time I think about it. It happened during a company gathering when I stood in front of more than 1,000 employees. The atmosphere was formal, structured. We were there to celebrate milestones and talk about the future. But in the middle of that stage, under the lights, something inside me cracked. I couldn't hold back and I broke down in front of everyone. But before I get into the story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever stood in front of people who believed in you so completely that it scared you? People who were ready to follow you even if you weren't sure you knew where the path would lead? Tell me in the comments yes or no. Because I want to know how many of you have felt that strange mix of power and vulnerability at the same time. I began the way I always do: numbers, slides, projections, plans. I talked about gigafactories we were building, about rocket stages landing back on Earth when most of the world still thought it was science fiction, about cars that would drive themselves through the night while their owners slept. My voice was steady, the delivery sharp, like the 1,000 other times I'd spoken. The audience nodded in rhythm, their faces lit up by the glow of the giant screen behind me. But here's the truth. Inside, I wasn't steady at all. I was exhausted. I had been awake the entire night before, my mind running in circles, replaying something over and over. At first, I thought I could push it aside, that the sheer momentum of the event, the adrenaline of speaking in front of so many people would bury it, but it didn't. It sat there heavy in my chest waiting, and then something small happened that tipped everything. I don't even know if anyone noticed. As I clicked to the next slide, my voice caught not even for a full second, just a tiny stutter like static in the middle of a broadcast. Most people would have brushed past it, but I felt it, and when I looked up again, the numbers on the screen blurred, became meaningless. I saw the faces in the audience, people I'd walked past in the halls, people I'd shared quick handshakes and brief thank yous with. Some of them had left their families in other states, other countries just to be here. Some had risked their careers, betting that I wasn't insane, that this vision was real. And in that second I thought, do they really know me? Do they know what I've carried to get here? Or do they only know the slides, the projections, the Elon that stands on stages and promises the future? That thought pierced something open. Suddenly, the speech I had prepared, the neat structure, the logical progression, it all felt hollow. It wasn't enough, not for them and not for me. So I did something I hadn't planned. I stepped away from the podium, away from the script, and I just said it. Before I go any further, before I give you the roadmap and the numbers you came for, I need to tell you something I've never said out loud in a room like this. And just like that, the air changed. 1,000 people shifted. In their seats, some leaned forward, some stopped typing notes. It's strange how silence can grow heavier than sound. I could feel the weight of their attention pressing in on me. It was as if they already knew this wasn't going to be about cars or rockets or quarterly goals. My throat tightened, but I pushed on because I realized something in that instant. If I only ever stood in front of them as the unshakable visionary, the one who always had an answer, I'd be lying. And what good is building the future if you have to hide the truth in the process? What came next wasn't about death or tragedy in the way most people think. It wasn't about losing someone forever. It was about a wound I thought I had patched up long ago. A failure I carried in silence, an event that shaped me far more than any success ever did. And when I began to speak about it, my voice betrayed me. For the first time in front of my own people, my voice broke. I could feel the sting in my eyes before the first tear even formed. And as ridiculous as it sounds, my first instinct wasn't sadness. It was fear. What would they think? Would they see me as weak? Would they believe less in the mission because their leader couldn't hold himself together? But then I looked out again and I didn't see judgment. I saw recognition. I saw people nodding. Not because they understood the specifics, but because they understood the feeling of carrying something too heavy for too long. And that was the exact moment, the second I let the first tear fall, that the story I thought I was hiding became the most important thing I had to share. I took a deep breath, my hand, still clutching the clicker, was trembling, and I set it down on the podium as if the extra weight of plastic might be the thing that pushed me over the edge. My chest felt tight. It wasn't the pressure of the audience anymore. It was the pressure of memory. There's something I've kept to myself for years. I began. My voice was low, softer than usual, and the microphone made it echo in a way that felt almost too raw, too unguarded. It's not about rockets or cars or factories. It's about something I lost, something that to this day I still think about when I close my eyes at night. I saw people glance at each other, puzzled. Some probably expected me to pivot into a story about a failed prototype, a project that burned through billions, an early collapse that nearly killed Tesla or SpaceX. But this wasn't about business. Not this time. It was years ago, I continued. I was building, pushing, trying to balance 1,000 impossible things at once, and in the middle of all of that, there was someone I cared about deeply. She was there through the long nights, through the endless stress, through the moments when it looked like everything was going to fall apart. And yet, despite all of that, I failed her. I let the mission consume me so completely that I couldn't be present. I missed birthdays, I missed dinners, I missed the quiet conversations that keep two people close. The words were harder to say than I expected. My throat constricted, my lips pressed together as if to keep the memories from spilling out. But once I started, there was no going back. One night, I said, pausing as the imagery played in my mind. We had plans, something small, nothing dramatic, just the dinner. I promised that I'd be there, no distractions, no phone, no emails, no factories. I told her I'd show up on time, and then, as always, something came up, an issue with a production line, a late-night call from an investor. I convinced myself it couldn't wait, and by the time I arrived, she was gone. The restaurant was closing, the table was empty except for a folded napkin. On it, she had written just 5 words, "You're always somewhere else." I stopped, my voice cracked. The screen behind me, filled with charts and projections, suddenly seemed absurd, almost mocking, because in that moment all I could see was that napkin, that sentence. Those words that said more than any fight or argument ever could. The room was silent, you could have heard a pin drop. She didn't leave that night, I continued after a long pause. But the truth is, she left long before, piece by piece. Every time I said just 5 more minutes, every time I chose the company over a conversation, every time I thought the mission justified the sacrifice. By the time I noticed, the distance between us was already too wide to cross. I felt my eyes blur again. I blinked hard, but the tear slipped through anyway, tracing a slow, humiliating path down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. For once, I didn't hide it. Why am I telling you this? I asked almost to myself as much as to the 1,000 people in front of me, because I don't want you to make the same mistake. Because all of this, I gestured toward the slides, the charts, the bold words on the screen. None of it matters if you lose yourself. If you lose the people who make your life worth living. I thought I was building a future, but at that time I was destroying the present, and that cost me something I can never get back. I heard someone in the front row shift in their seat. Another person raised a hand slightly, as if wanting to clap, but not sure if it was appropriate. The air was heavy, charged with something beyond work, beyond technology. This wasn't about leadership anymore, it was about humanity. The strange thing is, as I spoke, I felt something lift. The shame, the guilt I had carried quietly. For so many years, it didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip, because sharing it made it real, not just a ghost I carried in silence. I cried that night, I admitted. Not because she left the restaurant, not because of the napkin, but because I realized what I had done. I had chosen to be a leader for the world instead of a partner for the person I loved. And leadership without love, without presence, is hollow. That was the moment I understood it's possible to change the world and still fail at life. My voice failed again, but this time I didn't fight it. The tears came freely and I let them, 1,000 employees watching their CEO break down in front of them. And instead of recoiling, instead of whispering, they leaned in, they were with me, not with the Elon Musk on the magazine covers, not with the Elon who promises Mars colonies, but with the Elon who lost something irreplaceable because he thought he could wait until later. And when I finally stopped speaking, the silence wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, full of reflection, full of the quiet recognition that even the people who seem unstoppable are breakable. For a moment after my words faded, there was nothing, just silence. Silence so thick I could almost hear the hum of the lights above, the faint of the projector, the creak of someone shifting their weight in the back row. My heart was pounding. I wasn't sure if I'd just shattered something beyond repair, my image, their faith, this whole carefully balanced dynamic between leader and team. And then it happened. It started softly like rain before a storm. A few pairs of hands came together, hesitant, unsure if clapping was the right response to what had just unfolded. But the sound grew, spreading from the front rows to the back, until the entire room was applauding. Not the polite automatic applause you give after a presentation, but something deeper. It wasn't for the slides or the vision or even the company. It was for the truth, for the moment of raw humanity that cut through the rehearsed lines and the endless grind of deadlines. I felt my shoulders drop, the weight in my chest loosened just a little, and then, before the applause even fully died down, a voice rang out. "Can I say something?" The room stilled again. All eyes turned toward the middle rows where a man in his mid-30s, one of our engineers, stood up. His badge swung slightly against his chest as he cleared his throat. I knew his face. I'd passed him in the cafeteria, maybe exchanged a nod, but I didn't know his name off the top of my head. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, but when he spoke, his voice carried. I need to thank you," he said, glancing toward me. "Because what you just shared, it's my story too." You could feel the room tighten again, not in discomfort, but in anticipation. He wasn't just going to thank me, he was about to unearth something of his own. "I almost lost my wife last year," he continued. "Not because of money, not because of some fight that got out of hand, but because I wasn't there. I was here in this building night after night, chasing a deadline, chasing perfection. I told myself it was temporary, that she'd understand, that it was all for the future we were building. But the truth is, she was alone. She was raising our kids by herself while I was chasing a dream. And one night she said to me, "I don't want your future if it means I don't get your present." The words hung in the air, raw and heavy. Some people shifted in their seats, others looked down, their faces tightening with recognition. It was as if the whole room had been holding back their own versions of that story, and now the dam had cracked. The engineer's voice wavered. I thought it was over. I thought I'd lost her, but somehow she gave me another chance, and I promised myself. I promised her that I would never again let ambition erase the people I love. I felt my throat tighten again. The courage it took for him to stand up, to lay his heart bare in front of colleagues, in front of me. It was no less than what I had just done. In that moment, I saw not just an employee, but a human being fighting the same battle I had fought. I stepped forward, gesturing for the microphone to be passed to him. He hesitated, then took it, his hands trembling slightly. When he finished, I walked toward the edge of the stage. "Thank you," I said, my voice steadier now though, still thick with emotion. "Thank you for saying what so many of us are afraid to admit. You're not alone. None of us are." The audience erupted again, not just in applause, but in something deeper. Some people shouted, yes, others clapped harder than before. A woman in the front row dabbed at her eyes. It wasn't a company meeting anymore. It was a confession, a collective unmasking of the hidden costs of ambition. I looked at him directly. "You made a promise and you're keeping it. That takes more strength than building rockets or cars. Don't ever think otherwise." His eyes glistened as he nodded, and for a moment it felt like the roles had reversed. I wasn't the leader giving reassurance. I was one of them, another flawed human being trying to balance impossible weights. And then something extraordinary happened. Another hand went up, and then another. One by one, employees began sharing pieces of themselves. A missed graduation, a broken engagement, a parent they barely visited, before it was too late. The stories flowed, each one different, yet all bound by the same thread. The sacrifices we make for work, and the realization that some sacrifices cut too deep. I didn't interrupt. I didn't rush them. I let the room belong to them, to us. By the time the last person sat down, there was no doubt left in my mind. This wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't weakness. It was the most human, the most unifying thing I had ever been a part of in my career. And standing there, surrounded by 1,000 people who suddenly felt less like employees and more like family, I understood something I wish I had known much earlier. Sometimes the strongest thing a leader can do is to cry first so others feel safe enough to follow. When the whole finally quieted, I looked out at the sea of faces. Faces that had seen me stumble, break, and rise again. My chest was still heavy, but in a different way now. It was no longer just pain. It was gratitude. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for building this company with me, not for me. With me. None of this, none of the rockets, the cars, the ideas that once seemed impossible, none of it happens without you." I paused and let the silence stretch for a moment. You've probably heard me talk about the future 1,000 times. Mars, renewable energy, AI. But here's the truth. None of that matters if we forget the people building it. The future is only real if the people who create it feel valued, supported, and seen. I walked a few steps across the stage, scanning the audience. Work will always be hard. There will be days when everything breaks, when failure feels inevitable, when you question why you even started. But progress doesn't come from perfection. It comes from persistence. Progress is made by people who wake up tired, who fall down, who doubt themselves, and who still stand back up anyway. The room was utterly silent, hanging on to every word. So when tomorrow feels overwhelming, or when next week's deadline looks impossible, remember this. Impossible is exactly what we are here to do, and when you feel alone in that struggle, look around. The person next to you, whether they're designing, coding, welding, testing, they're not just coworkers, they're family, and families don't quit on each other. I could feel my throat tighten again, but this time I pushed forward. "You've given me your time, your talent, and your trust. That's the most valuable currency in the world. And I don't take it for granted. I can never fully repay it, but I can promise you this. I will keep fighting, I will keep pushing, and I will never stop believing in you the way you've believed in me." I let my eyes wander across the crowd, trying to meet as many gazes as I could. "And one more thing, don't let this company be the only place where you push boundaries. Take that same courage into your own lives, into your families, into the things you care about when no one is watching. Because if you can bring that spirit into every corner of your life, then the impact you leave will stretch far beyond what we build here together." If this story moved you, share it with someone who might need a reminder. That vulnerability isn't weakness, it's strength. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story, and tell me this in the comments. When was the last time you allowed yourself to be fully human in front of others? And what did it change for you?